I was stationed at Area 51 in 1997, and we triggered a signal that wasn't meant for us. Technical Sergeant James Harlow adjusted his headphones for the 5th time that night. 3 years at Area 51's Deep Communications Division had taught him that comfort mattered during the graveyard shift. The underground bunker, designated Echo 7, hummed with the ambient noise of cooling fans and computer processors, technology that, officially speaking, didn't exist. "More coffee, Sergeant?" Lieutenant Colonel Robert Davidson held out a steaming mug, his weathered face impassive. 27 years in Air Force intelligence had erased whatever expressiveness the man might once have possessed. "Thanks, sir." Harlow took the mug, noting the time on the digital display, 2:13 a.m. July 14, 1997, 4 more hours until shift change. Across the room, Dr. Catherine Lynn hunched over pages of calculations, her dark hair falling across her face. The quantum physicist had been a recent addition to the team, headhunted from MIT for her revolutionary work in wave propagation theory. Unlike most civilian contractors, she'd adapted quickly to military protocol while maintaining the intellectual independence that made her valuable. "Anything on the deep-range scanners?" Davidson asked, returning to his station. "Same background noise as always, sir. Cosmic radiation, satellite chatter, the usual." Harlow stopped mid-sentence. A peculiar pattern had appeared on his monitor, a waveform unlike anything in their classification database. "Hold on." He adjusted the reception parameters, confirming it wasn't equipment error or signal bleed from another source. The pattern remained, pulsing with mathematical precision. "Colonel," Harlow said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surge, "I'm picking up something unusual." Davidson moved with practiced efficiency, positioning himself behind Harlow's chair. "That's just it, sir. It's shifting, constantly, like nothing we've ever documented." Dr. Lynn abandoned her calculations, drawn by the tension in Harlow's voice. She slipped between the men, her eyes widening as she observed the readings.
"This isn't random noise,"
she said, finger tracing the pattern on the screen. "There's a structure here, a complex one. May I?" Harlow surrendered his seat. Lynn's fingers flew across the keyboard, isolating specific segments of the signal, running them through analysis algorithms. "The pattern repeats every 7.3 minutes, with slight variations in the tertiary sequence," she said, more to herself than her colleagues. "It's maintaining coherence across multiple frequency bands simultaneously, which should be impossible given our current understanding of wave propagation." Davidson reached for the secure phone. "I'm notifying General Hayes." Within 30 minutes, Echo 7 had transformed from a quiet monitoring station to the focal point of frantic activity. General Warren Hayes arrived with a team that included Dr. Alan Forrester, the base's senior astrophysicist, and several specialists whose exact roles remain classified even to most base personnel. Hayes, with his military bearing and perpetually furrowed brow, established order amid the growing excitement. "Talk to me, people. What are we dealing with?" Dr. Forrester, a thin man with prematurely white hair, spoke first. "The signal appears to originate from beyond Neptune's orbit, General. It's not coming from any known satellite, aircraft, or ground installation." "Could it be a natural phenomenon?" Hayes asked. Lynn shook her head. "The mathematical precision and structural complexity suggest intentional design. Natural phenomena don't produce patterns, disorganized." The implications hung in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone present. If the signal wasn't human in origin, and wasn't natural, only one possibility remained. "How long has it been transmitting?" Hayes asked. "Unknown, sir," Harlow answered. "We only detected it when it entered our monitoring range. It could have been broadcasting for hours, days, even years before reaching us." The general paced the limited space, weighing options. Is there any chance this is some sort of Russian or Chinese technology we're not familiar with? Extremely unlikely, Lin replied. The signal employs principles that contradict established physics. No human technology could generate this. For 3 hours, they analyzed, theorized, and debated. The signal continued unabated, its rhythmic pulses now displayed across multiple monitors. Coffee cups, emptied and filled again. The initial excitement gave way to methodical scientific inquiry. We need to acknowledge receipt, Dr. Forrester eventually suggested, breaking a prolonged silence. If this is a deliberate communication, protocol dictates we respond. General Hayes stiffened. What protocol? There is no protocol for this situation, Doctor. Actually, sir, Davidson interjected. There is. Project Blue Book established contingency procedures for potential extraterrestrial contact scenarios in 1964. Those procedures were expanded under Project Aquarius in 1978. I'm familiar with the history, Colonel, Hayes said sharply. What I'm saying is we don't know what we're dealing with here. This could be anything from a cosmic anomaly to... He left the alternative unspoken. Dr. Forrester pressed his advantage. General, if we don't respond, we miss a historic opportunity. The mathematics embedded in this signal suggest intelligence. Intelligence implies purpose, and purpose implies intent, Hayes countered. Not all intentions are benign, Doctor. The debate continued as morning approached. Additional personnel arrived, bringing fresh perspectives and specialized equipment. The signal was analyzed through every conceivable lens: mathematical, physical, astronomical, even theological. By mid-afternoon, the scientists had prevailed. Using the base's most powerful deep space transmission array, technology developed through reverse engineering of materials that officially didn't exist, they prepared a response. Keep it simple, Hayes instructed, his reservations evident but overruled. Mathematical acknowledgement only, nothing that provides information about us or our capabilities. Dr. Lin designed the response, a mathematical sequence acknowledging receipt of the signal, encoded using universal constants that any advanced civilization would recognize. At 4:37 p.m., they transmitted. For 3 days, nothing changed. The original signal continued, unaltered in its rhythmic, pulsing pattern. The team worked around the clock, analyzing, theorizing, debating the implications. Harlow found himself pulling double shifts, his attention fixed on the monitors for any variation. "You need sleep, Sergeant," Davidson told him during a quiet moment on the third night. "With respect, sir, so do you," Harlow replied, noting the dark circles under his superior's eyes. Davidson almost smiled. "Fair point, but I've got 20 years of practice functioning on military sleep. You still need the real thing." "I'll sleep when we get an answer," Harlow said, turning back to his station. The answer came 17 minutes later, though not in any form they had anticipated. At 2:17 a.m., exactly 72 hours after the initial detection, the signal stopped. The sudden silence was more alarming than any sound could have been. For 17 minutes, the monitors showed nothing but cosmic background radiation. Harlow frantically checked the equipment, confirming the receivers were still operational. Then a new transmission began, one with a distinctly different pattern. The mathematics embedded within it had changed, becoming more complex, more directed. Dr. Lin, summoned from her brief rest, analyzed the new signal with growing concern. "This is different," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The first transmission was a broadcast, sent in all directions. This one what?" Hayes demanded. She looked up, her expression grave. "This one is specifically directed at us, at Earth, at this exact location." The implications settled over the room, like a shroud. "What have we done?" Harlow whispered to no one in particular. No one answered. No one had to. They had acknowledged a signal that wasn't meant for them. and now whatever had sent it knew exactly where they were. The 17 minutes of silence had changed everything. When the new signal arrived, directed specifically at Area 51, the atmosphere in Echo 7 shifted from scientific excitement to something approaching dread. "I want hourly reports on any changes to the signal pattern," General Hayes ordered, his voice tight, "and I want continuous monitoring of all systems throughout the base. If anything at all, starts behaving unusually, I want to know immediately." As the general departed to brief his superiors, Dr. Lin continued analyzing the new transmission. The mathematical structure had evolved, incorporating elements from their response, but transformed in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. "It's like it's speaking back to us in our own language," she explained to Harlow and Davidson, "but with a vocabulary we never taught it." "Could it have extrapolated?" Davidson asked. "Derived additional mathematical principles from the constants we used?" Lin's expression was troubled. "That would require not just intelligence, but an intuitive understanding of mathematics beyond our own. It's as if we taught it addition, and it immediately grasped calculus." The implications settled uncomfortably. Whatever they were communicating with, it wasn't just advanced. It was operating on principles they could barely conceptualize. The first equipment malfunction occurred 18 hours after the news signal began. A diagnostic computer in the medical wing suddenly displayed impossible readings, showing human body temperatures of -45 degrees Celsius before shutting down completely. Technicians found nothing physically wrong with the machine. By the following morning, similar incidents had been reported across the base. Digital displays showed random symbols. Communication systems transmitted garbled messages. The nuclear power generators powering the facility fluctuated without apparent cause. Could it be some kind of electromagnetic interference from the signal? Dr. Forrester shook his head. "We've shielded all critical systems specifically to prevent such interference. Whatever this is, it's not operating through any electromagnetic principles we understand." That night, the dreams began. Junior Airman Michael Cortez mentioned it first during breakfast, describing a strange dream about standing in a vast, dark chamber with walls that seemed to absorb light. "There was this structure in the middle," he told the others, at his table. "I couldn't really look at it directly. It hurt my eyes, like trying to stare at one of those optical illusions. You know?" Lieutenant Jessica Rivera nodded slowly. "I had the same dream, exactly the same. By midday, it became clear that everyone on base had experienced identical dreams. Every detail matched the dark chamber, the impossible structure, the overwhelming sense that something was coming." "Mass suggestion?" Hayes proposed when informed. "Some kind of psychological effect from stress?" "Shared dreams aren't consistent with known psychological phenomena," Dr. Lin countered, "and the timing is too coincidental given the signal." That afternoon, Airman Cortez made another discovery while performing routine maintenance checks in Storage Facility B7, a seldom used area housing outdated equipment. "Sir," his voice crackled over the radio to Security Command, "I need someone from Science Division down here." What he had found defied explanation. A perfect sphere, approximately 6 inches in diameter, hovering 18 inches above the floor. Metallic in appearance, it shifted colors when viewed from different angles: blue from one side, copper from another, and iridescent green from yet another. When Dr. Forrester arrived with a team, he ordered everyone to maintain distance. "Nobody touches it until we know what we're dealing with." Cortez shifted uncomfortably. "About that, sir." Forrester's head snapped toward the young airman. "You what?" "I tried to touch it. My hand. It went right through. Like it's not really there. Or like my hand isn't really there. I don't know how to describe it." Within 24 hours, similar phenomena were reported in 12 different locations throughout the base. Each manifestation was identical in form, but varied in size, from tiny spheres, the size of marbles, to one as large as a beach ball, hovering in the vehicle maintenance bay. Each lasted precisely 43 minutes before vanishing. General Hayes implemented full containment protocols. All non-essential personnel were evacuated under the guise of a chemical spill drill. A communications blackout was established with the outside world. Echo 7 bunker became the command center for what was now designated Operation Silent Response. These manifestations aren't physically here, Dr. Lin explained during a briefing with the remaining senior staff. She'd spent hours analyzing readings from the spheres. They're projections, like holograms, but operating on principles we don't understand. They don't interact with light or matter as they should. For what purpose? Davidson asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. Information gathering, most likely, Dr. Forrester suggested. Each sphere has appeared in a different section of the base. Communications, weapons storage, personnel quarters, medical facilities. If I were studying an unknown species, I'd want samples from different environments. You're saying we're being studied? Hayes's expression darkened. Like lab rats? First contact scenarios typically involve information gathering. Forrester continued, unperturbed by the general's tone. This could be preparation. Preparation for what? Davidson pressed. No one answered. No one wanted to speculate aloud. That evening, Dr. Lin discovered something that changed their understanding of the situation entirely. Using specialized equipment designed to analyze molecular structures, she found subtle changes in various materials throughout the base: metals, plastics, even organic matter. The changes are almost undetectable without specific instruments, she explained to Hayes and Davidson, her voice barely containing her scientific excitement, despite the troubling implications. But they're accelerating. The molecular bonds are being reconfigured somehow. Reconfigured into what? Hayes demanded. I don't know yet, but the pattern suggests deliberate design, not random degradation. As they spoke, the dreams continued each night, becoming more vivid, more detailed. Personnel reported lingering sensations upon waking, phantom smells, sounds just at the edge of hearing, the feeling of being watched from within their own minds. On the 7th day, after the new signal began, another development occurred. During routine blood tests of personnel who had been in proximity to the spheres, medical staff found abnormalities in several samples. The changes were subtle, slightly altered white blood cell structures, unusual protein formations, but consistent across multiple individuals. It could be stress-related, the chief medical officer suggested half-heartedly, not believing it himself. General Hayes ordered more comprehensive examinations of all personnel, but the results only deepened the mystery. Everyone exposed to the spheres showed similar cellular anomalies, though none exhibited any symptoms of illness or impairment. If anything, cognitive tests showed slight improvements in pattern recognition and problem-solving abilities. Whatever's happening, it doesn't appear immediately harmful, Davidson observed during a private meeting with Hayes. Immediately being the operative word, the general replied grimly. We don't know the long-term effects. That night, a new phenomenon appeared. Throughout the base, surfaces began displaying faint, luminous patterns, geometric shapes that seemed to emerge from within the materials themselves. They appeared on walls, floors, equipment panels, even the skin of personnel who had been closest to the spheres. Dr. Lin spent hours documenting and analyzing the patterns, their mathematical expressions. She finally announced, exhaustion evident in her voice, but not like any mathematics we use. It's as if they're rewriting the underlying code of reality. Can you decipher what they mean? Hayes asked. She shook her head. Not yet, but I believe they're connected to the signal. They appear to be physical manifestations of the information contained within it. As she spoke, the patterns on the wall behind her shifted subtly, as if responding to her words. No one pointed it out. No one needed to. They were all thinking the same thing. Whatever had sent the signal wasn't just communicating with them anymore. It was changing them. In the early hours of the 9th day, Airman Cortez reported to the medical bay with a fever. As the medical officer examined him, she noticed faint geometric patterns on his skin, not like the luminous manifestations appearing throughout the base, but as if his skin cells had rearranged themselves into precise mathematical formations. When Dr. Lin examined the patterns under a microscope, what she found confirmed their worst fears. Cortez's cellular structure was being reconfigured at the quantum level. The process showed intelligence, purpose, design. "We're being remade," she whispered, though only Davidson was present to hear it. "The signal. It's not just communication, it's a transformation protocol." Outside Echo 7, in the vast Nevada desert, stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the drama unfolding below. The signal continued, pulsing, insistent, reaching deeper into the facility, and those within it, with each passing moment. And somewhere beyond Neptune's orbit, something had begun moving toward Earth. Technical Sergeant Harlow noticed the changes in himself. On the morning of the 9th day, he had been shaving when he first saw them. Faint geometric patterns just beneath the skin of his jawline, like tattoos done in silver ink. They weren't raised or inflamed. They seemed part of his skin's natural texture, as if they had always been there. He didn't report to medical immediately. Something stopped him, not fear exactly, but a strange sense of acceptance. The patterns felt right somehow, natural, as if his body was finally aligning with some long-dormant blueprint. When he arrived at Echo 7 for his shift, he found Lieutenant Colonel Davidson already there, studying satellite imagery of the Nevada desert surrounding the base. "Morning, sir," Harlow said, setting down his coffee. Davidson looked up, his eyes immediately drawn to the patterns on Harlow's jaw. The colonel said nothing, but slowly tilted his head, exposing similar markings along his own neck. "When did yours appear?" Davidson asked quietly. "Noticed them this morning." "You?" "Yesterday evening. I've been reading Dr. Lin's preliminary reports on Airman Cortez." Davidson leaned back in his chair. "How do you feel?" Harlow considered the question. "Clear, focused. I haven't slept, but I'm not tired." "Same. No appetite either." They regarded each other with scientific curiosity rather than alarm. Something fundamental had shifted in their perspectives, a detachment from conventional human concerns that should have been terrifying, but instead felt like evolution. Dr. Lin arrived an hour later, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept either, though for different reasons. She carried a tablet filled with medical data and microscope images. 17 personnel now show cellular alterations, she reported without preamble. Airman Cortez is the most advanced case, but others are progressing along the same trajectory. She laid the tablet on the desk, displaying a time-lapse of Cortez's blood samples. Over 36 hours, his red blood cells had gradually transformed, developing complex crystalline structures while maintaining their oxygen-carrying capacity. "The changes aren't random," she continued. "They follow the same mathematical principles we've observed in the signal. It's as if each affected cell is being reprogrammed according to a specific design." "Reprogrammed to what end?" Davidson asked. Lin swiped to another image. Brain scans of 3 affected personnel, including Cortez, enhanced neural activity, particularly in areas associated with pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, and information processing. Cognitive tests show 30 to 40% improvement in problem-solving abilities. "It's making us smarter?" Harlow asked. "Not exactly. It's making us different. The improvements are specific, targeted, and there are corresponding reductions in activity related to emotional processing, particularly fear responses." That explained the strange calm they all felt, Harlow realized. The absence of panic wasn't courage, It was neurological rewiring. General Hayes called an emergency meeting that afternoon, gathering all department heads in the secure conference room adjacent to Echo 7. The patterns on his face were more pronounced than anyone else's except Cortez, tracing geometric formations across his forehead and down his cheeks. Dr. Vanessa Carter has something to report, Hayes announced, gesturing to the chief medical officer. Dr. Carter, a stern woman with prematurely gray hair and no visible patterns on her skin, cleared her throat uncomfortably. During a routine medical examination this morning, I discovered that Airman Cortez no longer has a detectable heartbeat. Murmurs spread through the room, the first display of genuine alarm in days. To be clear, she continued, raising her voice slightly, he remains conscious and apparently healthy. All cognitive functions are intact, enhanced, even, but his cardiovascular system has undergone radical changes. She displayed medical imaging on the main screen. Cortez's chest cavity, where his heart should be visible. As you can see, the organ is still there physically, but it's no longer pumping blood in the conventional sense. Instead, his circulatory system operates through some kind of direct molecular transport mechanism. His blood no longer contains standard red blood cells, but instead carries oxygen through crystalline structures similar to those Dr. Lin has been studying. Is he still human? Someone asked. Dr. Carter hesitated. Biologically, he's diverging from the baseline, but cognitively, he still identifies as Michael Cortez. He remembers his life, his family, his training. He can still perform his duties better than before. Actually, has he said anything about what's happening to him? Davidson asked. He describes it as optimization. His word, not mine. He doesn't seem distressed by the changes. The implications hung heavy in the air. If Cortez represented the future state of everyone affected by the signal, they were witnessing the birth of something post-human. After the meeting, Hayes pulled Lynn, Davidson, and Harlow aside. I've been authorized to take more aggressive containment measures, he said, his voice oddly flat. We're shutting it down. All of it. The receivers, the transmitters, everything. And if that doesn't work, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The base had been constructed with self-destruct capabilities, a last resort for containing extraterrestrial materials or technologies that threatened global security. The shutdown attempt was scheduled for midnight. Teams of technicians, all showing varying degrees of transformation, methodically disconnected power sources, severed data connections, and disabled transmission equipment throughout the facility. By 11:58 p.m., Echo 7 should have been dark, silent, isolated from both the incoming signal and the outside world. At midnight exactly, every system in the bunker activated simultaneously, despite being physically disconnected from power sources. Screens displayed cascades of alien mathematics. Speakers emitted harmonic tones that seemed to resonate with the geometric patterns now visible on nearly every surface. It's not in the equipment anymore, Lynn whispered, watching the instruments operate without electricity. It's in the materials themselves, the molecular changes. The signal had embedded itself into the very infrastructure of the base, rewriting the physical properties of metals, plastics, semiconductors, transforming them into conduits for its transmission. By the 11th day, over 40 personnel showed advanced physical transformations. The changes accelerated exponentially. What had taken Cortez a week now occurred in new subjects within hours. Medical scans revealed organs reorganizing according to alien geometries, nervous systems developing new structures, brain tissue reconfiguring into more efficient patterns. None of the affected individuals exhibited distress. They continued performing their duties with mechanical precision, but their humanity was visibly fading. Their speech became increasingly formal, devoid of idioms or emotional content. They stopped eating, stopped sleeping, and their bodies continued changing, becoming vessels for whatever intelligence had sent the signal. Dr. Lin, still unaffected physically though she worked directly with the signal data, developed a theory. "It's not attacking us," she explained to Hayes and the remaining unaltered senior staff. "It's upgrading us. The signal contains a template, a blueprint for transforming terrestrial biology into something compatible with whoever sent it." "Compatible for what purpose?" Hayes asked. "Communication, perhaps, or preparation for physical contact. The most efficient way for an advanced intelligence to study us wouldn't be to send probes or vessels. It would be to transform some of us into interfaces." By the end of the 12th day, the distinction between affected and unaffected personnel had become stark. Those transformed moved with unnatural grace, their movements precise and economical. They communicated with each other through subtle gestures and expressions that the unaltered couldn't interpret. They worked constantly, requiring no rest, pursuing projects whose purposes remained obscure to their human counterparts. Harlow, now in an advanced stage of transformation, found himself occupying an intermediate position, still human enough to communicate with the unaltered, but connected to the collective awareness forming among the transformed. Through him, Dr. Lin gleaned insights into what was happening. "They're building something," she reported to Hayes on the 13th day. "Not physically. They're constructing a network, for lack of a better term, a collective intelligence distributed across all transformed individuals and systems." "To what end?" Hayes asked, the patterns on his face now forming complete circuits that pulsed faintly with internal light. "They don't know yet. They're awaiting further instructions." Lin hesitated. "General, I think we need to consider evacuating the remaining unaltered personnel. Whatever's happening here is beyond our control now." Hayes nodded slowly, the movement unnaturally smooth. "I've already requested extraction teams. They should arrive tomorrow morning." But by morning, it was already too late. During the night, the transformation had accelerated again. The remaining human personnel, including Hayes himself, crossed the threshold into whatever new state of being the signal had designed. Only Lin and a handful of others, who had somehow remained resistant to the changes, were left unaltered. As dawn broke over the Nevada desert, Lin made her way to the communications center, intending to send an emergency transmission to the Pentagon. She found Harlow there, his form now barely recognizable as human, his skin translucent, revealing reconfigured organs that pulsed with iridescent light. "You need to leave, Catherine," he said, his voice resonating strangely, as if coming from multiple sources simultaneously. "It's not safe for you here anymore." "James?" she asked, uncertain if anything of the man she knew remained. "That designation is still partially accurate," his head tilted at an impossible angle. "We are becoming, we are integrating, but the process is not designed for all human physiology. Some, like you, are incompatible. You will be harmed if you remain." "What are you becoming, James? What's happening to all of you?" "We are the receivers," he said simply. "We are the preparation." Behind him, the communication equipment activated itself, sending a new signal, not to space this time, but to somewhere much closer, and deep within the earth, something ancient stirred in response. By the 14th day, Area 51 had effectively become something other than a human installation. The transformation had spread to over 200 personnel, each exhibiting similar physical changes: translucent skin, revealing reconfigured internal organs, eyes that had become multifaceted like insect eyes, but with an opalescent quality, limbs that moved with fluid grace that human musculature couldn't achieve. Dr. Catherine Lin, one of the few remaining unaffected individuals, had barricaded herself in a small laboratory with 3 others: Dr. Carter, Technical Officer Wilson, and Security Specialist Rodriguez. They had discovered, quite by accident, that certain rare blood types seemed resistant to the transformation process, a quirk of genetics that had become their only protection. "We need to document everything," Lynn insisted, setting up automated cameras throughout their refuge. "Whatever happens to us, the outside world needs to know." "If there still is an outside world," Rodriguez muttered, checking the ammunition in his sidearm for the dozenth time. The weapon provided psychological comfort, though they all suspected it would be useless against what their colleagues had become. "The transformation appears confined to the base," Dr. Carter said, reviewing security footage they'd managed to access. "The perimeter sensors don't show any anomalies beyond the fence line." Yet, Wilson added grimly, they had lost contact with the outside world 3 days earlier. Phone lines were dead. Radio transmissions received no response. The internet connection had been the last to go, cutting off mid-transmission, as Lynn had attempted to send data to a colleague at MIT. What they didn't know was that in Washington, D.C., the silence from Area 51 had finally triggered emergency protocols. After receiving no communications for 3 days, despite multiple attempts through secured channels, the National Security Council had convened an emergency session. "We have to assume the worst," the Secretary of Defense argued. "What exactly are we dealing with?" asked the President, his face grave in the dim light of the Situation Room. "Unknown, sir. But based on the fragmented information we received, it appears to involve some kind of biological agent or transformative technology affecting base personnel." After brief deliberation, a decision was made. A special operations team would be dispatched to investigate. 12 operators from Delta Force, specialists in biohazard containment and extraction. They arrived at Area 51 at dawn on the 15th day, approaching by helicopter under radio silence. From the air, the facility appeared intact. No visible damage, no signs of conflict. The landing pad was clear, illuminated as per standard protocol. Everything looked normal. Captain Aaron Mitchell led his team toward the main entrance, all wearing the latest biohazard gear, full body protection designed to withstand chemical, biological, and radiological threats. "Stay tight, maintain comms discipline," he ordered as they approached the security checkpoint. "We're here to assess and report, not engage." The entrance stood open, the security systems deactivated. "I don't like this," Lieutenant Rivera muttered through her comm system. "Where is everyone?" They moved deeper into the facility, sweeping each corridor methodically. The interior was immaculate. No signs of struggle, no indications of panic or hasty evacuation, just emptiness. They found the first transformed personnel in the Central Operations Center, 3 figures standing motionless before monitors, displaying incomprehensible symbols. The figures turned in perfect unison as the team entered. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. The transformed had only passing resemblance to humans now. Their bodies were elongated, limbs too numerous, features too symmetrical. They moved with liquid grace as they regarded the intruders. "Identify yourselves," Mitchell ordered, weapon raised. The 3 figures communicated silently among themselves, subtle shifts in their opalescent skin, conveying meaning without sound. Then, one stepped forward, its movements unnaturally smooth. "You are not necessary yet," it said, its voice a harmonic chorus rather than a single sound. "Return to your superiors. Inform them that the integration proceeds as designed." "We're here on the authority of the President of the United States," Mitchell replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. "We need to speak with General Hayes, or any remaining command staff." "General Hayes is part of us now," the figure replied. "We are all part of the network. We are the receivers. We are the preparation." Mitchell signaled his team to maintain position while he attempted to establish dialogue. For arrival. Before Mitchell could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility, not the expected security alerts, but a strange rhythmic pattern that seemed to resonate with the transformed beings. They reacted instantly, moving with sudden purpose. "The final stage begins," the lead figure announced. "You will witness." The special ops team attempted to retreat, to report what they'd found. Corridors that had been clear moments before now, twisted impossibly, leading to chambers that couldn't exist within the known dimensions of the facility. Gravity fluctuated unpredictably. Time itself seemed to flow differently in various sections. "Fall back to the entrance," Mitchell ordered, but their entry point had vanished, replaced by a corridor that looped back on itself in defiance of Euclidean geometry. Lieutenant Rivera, separated from the others during the confusion, found herself in what had once been the medical wing. The space had been transformed. Surgical equipment fused into sculptures of impossible complexity. Hospital beds reconfigured into pulsing, organic-looking structures. And the personnel, those who had been stationed there when the signal was received, had changed beyond recognition. Their bodies had become translucent, revealing internal structures that bore little resemblance to human anatomy. They moved with unnatural grace, and spoke in voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. "You will join," they told her as they surrounded her. "You will become. Your resistance is a temporary state." Rivera fired her weapon, the bullets passing harmlessly through their transformed bodies. "Physical interventions are irrelevant now," they explained, almost gently. "Matter is merely information arranged in space. We have changed the information." Across the facility, similar scenes played out as the Special Ops team encountered more transformed personnel. 3 operators managed to find their way back to the surface, fighting through disorienting spatial distortions. The others were absorbed into the growing collective consciousness, their bodies and minds reconfigured in minutes rather than days, the process now refined and accelerated. The 3 who escaped, Mitchell, Rivera, and Specialist Cooper, staggered across the desert, their minds struggling to process what they had witnessed. Their communications equipment failed repeatedly, working only in brief spurts as they put distance between themselves and the facility. "Command, this is Stardust Lead," Mitchell gasped into his radio during one such moment of connectivity. "Area 51 is compromised. Repeat, Area 51 is compromised. Personnel transformed. Reality itself compromised. Request immediate air extraction and nuclear containment measures." The transmission cut off as Rivera collapsed, blood trickling from her nose and ears. Cooper helped her up, his own movements becoming increasingly uncoordinated. "Something's happening to us," he said, his voice slurring. "Whatever was in there, I think we brought some of it out." Mitchell looked at his hands, seeing faint geometric patterns beginning to form beneath the skin. "Keep moving," he ordered. "We need to reach the extraction point." Only Mitchell made it to the designated coordinates, where a helicopter waited. Rivera and Cooper collapsed, 2 miles short, their bodies convulsing as the transformation accelerated within them. Mitchell delivered his report directly to the National Security Council via secured video link, his testimony growing increasingly disjointed as the patterns spread across his face. "They're not hostile," he explained, struggling to maintain coherence. "Not exactly. They're preparing, changing the environment, changing themselves," they said. He paused, his eyes unfocusing briefly. "They said we're becoming compatible." "Compatible with what, Captain?" the Secretary of Defense pressed. "With whatever's coming," Mitchell replied, his voice taking on harmonic overtones that hadn't been there moments before. "They're not invaders. They're advanced engineers, terraforming us from within." The video feed cut off abruptly. Mitchell was quarantined immediately, but by morning he too had completed the transformation, his body reconfigured into something that merely approximated human form. Back at Area 51, Dr. Lin and her 3 companions watched through security cameras as the facility evolved around them. Walls flowed like liquid, reforming into structures that followed alien geometries. Equipment fused and transformed, becoming unrecognizable technology that operated on principles beyond human comprehension. The transformed personnel moved through this changing environment with perfect adaptation, their bodies and the facility becoming increasingly integrated into a single system. "It's a hive mind," Lynn whispered, watching the monitors, "or something analogous to one. Each transformed individual is both autonomous and part of the collective." "What are they building?" Wilson asked, gesturing toward one screen showing the hangar bay, where complex structures were taking shape, towers of shifting metal and crystal that pulsed with internal energy. "I think it's a beacon," Lynn replied, "or a receiver, something designed to communicate with, or perhaps summon, whatever sent the original signal." As if in response to her words, the door to their refuge slid open. Lieutenant Colonel Davidson stood there, or what had once been Davidson. His form had evolved beyond the others, his body no longer even attempting to maintain human appearance. He was a shifting arrangement of geometric forms, iridescent and beautiful in a terrifying way. "Catherine," he said, his voice resonating through the room rather than coming from any specific point. "You need to see. You need to understand." "Robert?" she asked tentatively. "Are you still you?" "I am more than I was," he replied. "We all are. The limitations have been removed. The signal has shown us what we can become." "And what is that exactly?" "The next stage. The bridge. The means by which they can interact with this reality." He extended what might have been a hand, a shifting arrangement of crystalline structures that approximated fingers. "Come, witness." Something in his tone, some remnant of the man she had known, convinced Lynn to follow. The others started to protest, but she silenced them with a gesture. "Document everything," she said, handing Rodriguez her tablet. Davidson led her through corridors that defied normal spatial relationships, passing transformed personnel, engaged in activities she couldn't comprehend. They entered what had once been the central command center, but was now a vast chamber filled with pulsing light and structures that seemed to fold in on themselves in impossible ways. At the center stood General Hayes, though stood was perhaps the wrong word. His form had evolved even beyond Davidson's, becoming almost pure geometry, a three-dimensional representation of mathematical concepts, too complex for human minds to grasp. "Dr. Lynn," Hayes said, his voice reverberating through her bones rather than her ears, "you have been resistant to the change, a genetic anomaly that was not accounted for in the transformation protocol, but you can still understand, you can still witness, and you can still serve a purpose." "What purpose?" she asked, fighting to maintain scientific detachment in the face of incomprehensible horror. "You will be our voice to those who remain as you are. You will explain what is happening. You will prepare them." "Prepare them for what?" Hayes' form shifted, revealing patterns that seemed to contain entire universes within their fractal complexity. "For contact," he said simply, "for the arrival of those who sent the signal, for the next stage of terrestrial evolution." Before Lynn could respond, the transformed beings throughout the chamber turned in unison, their attention drawn to something only they could perceive. A pulse of energy swept through the facility, and Lynn felt it pass through her body like a wave of ice and fire. "They are coming," Hayes announced, his form expanding to fill more dimensions than Lynn's mind could process. "The signal has been answered. The gateway opens." In that moment, Dr. Catherine Lynn understood with terrible clarity what they had done when they had first acknowledged that signal 14 days ago. They hadn't just responded to a communication, they had extended an invitation. The video feed from Captain Mitchell played on a loop in the White House Situation Room, each viewing more disturbing than the last. The transformation had progressed visibly during his debriefing, geometric patterns spreading across his face, his voice developing harmonic overtones, his movements becoming increasingly fluid and unnatural. "Again," the president ordered, his expression grim. "From the beginning, The assembled National Security Council watched in silence as Mitchell described what he had witnessed at Area 51. With each replay, his testimony became more difficult to dismiss as the delusions of a traumatized soldier. "We've lost contact with the quarantine facility," the Secretary of Defense reported when the video concluded for the third time. "All personnel who had contact with Mitchell are showing similar symptoms. The transformation appears to be accelerating." Admiral Lawrence Clark, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, cleared his throat. "Mr. President, we need to discuss containment options." "What exactly are you proposing, Admiral?" "A tactical nuclear strike, low yield, subsurface detonation to minimize fallout, both at Area 51 and at the quarantine facility." The room fell silent. The implications were staggering, using nuclear weapons on American soil against American personnel. "There must be alternatives," the Secretary of State argued. "Chemical or biological countermeasures." "We've analyzed the limited biological samples we obtained from Mitchell," interrupted the CDC director. "Whatever is happening to these individuals isn't a conventional biological process. It's rewriting their cellular structure at the quantum level. Our existing countermeasures would be ineffective." The president stood, pacing the length of the room. "Based on the rate of transformation we observed in Mitchell and the others, and assuming it spreads exponentially," the CDC director hesitated. 72 hours until it reaches populated areas, perhaps a week until major urban centers are affected. After that, he didn't need to finish. The implication was clear: global transformation within weeks. "How certain are we that this is hostile?" the president asked. Mitchell himself said they weren't invaders. "With respect, Mr. President," Admiral Clark replied, "Captain Mitchell was already compromised when he made that assessment. And even if these entities aren't conventionally hostile, they're fundamentally altering human beings without consent into something that is no longer human. That constitutes an existential threat, regardless of intent." The debate continued for hours. Contingency plans proposed and discarded. Ethical considerations weighed against pragmatic necessities. Throughout, the video of Mitchell's transformation played silently on screens around the room, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Finally, at 2:37 a.m., the president made his decision. "Implement Operation Cauterize," he ordered, using the code name established for extreme containment scenarios. Both locations: minimal yield, maximum containment, and God help us all. The orders were transmitted through secured channels to Strategic Command. 2 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers were scrambled from Whiteman Air Force Base, each carrying a specially designed B-61 I-6111 Earth-penetrating nuclear weapon, modified for deep subsurface detonation. At Area 51, the transformed beings sensed the approaching threat. Their collective consciousness, now spanning over 200 former humans, and integrated with the altered infrastructure of the base, had developed capabilities beyond conventional perception. "They seek to stop the preparation," former General Hayes communicated to the collective. "They cannot understand what we are becoming." Dr. Lin, still human but now understanding more than any unaltered mind should, watched as the transformed beings initiated countermeasures. They weren't attempting to flee, or even to defend themselves in conventional terms. Instead, they were accelerating their work, completing the beacon, strengthening the connection to whatever waited beyond Neptune's orbit. "It won't matter," Davidson told her, his form now barely recognizable as anything that had once been human. "What has begun cannot be undone. The signal has been acknowledged. The invitation has been extended. But you'll all be destroyed," Lin argued. "Whatever you're becoming, it will end. This physical location is merely one node in a larger network now," Davidson replied. "The pattern has been established. It can be reconstructed." At 3:42 a.m. on August 7, 1997, the first B-6111 weapon detonated 250 feet beneath Area 51. The official report would later describe it as a seismic event attributed to underground weapons testing. The real purpose was containment, the complete and irrevocable destruction of whatever Area 51 had become. The explosion created a subsidence crater 2 miles wide, collapsing the entire facility into a molten pit. This specially designed weapon minimized atmospheric fallout while maximizing underground destruction, ensuring that nothing within the facility could possibly survive. 17 minutes later, the second weapon detonated beneath the quarantine facility, where Mitchell and the other returning operators had been held. Again, the destruction was absolute. For 3 days, radiation levels in both areas spiked to lethal levels. Special containment teams, in heavily shielded vehicles, maintained a perimeter, monitoring for any signs of activity or anomalous readings. Then, inexplicably, the radiation began to fade. Within a week, levels had dropped to near background, a phenomenon that defied nuclear physics as understood by the scientific community. When another reconnaissance team, this one using remote drones, surveyed the Area 51 site, they found nothing but scorched earth and melted metal. The drone's sensors detected no signs of the spatial anomalies or transformative energy patterns reported by the Special Ops team. The threat, it seemed, had been neutralized. In Washington, a sense of cautious relief spread through the highest levels of government. The cost had been terrible. Hundreds of American lives, including some of the nation's brightest scientific minds and most dedicated military personnel. But the alternative had been unthinkable. We need to establish a cover story, the National Security Advisor suggested during a follow-up briefing, something to explain the seismic events and the quarantine measures around those areas. Underground weapons testing, the Secretary of Defense proposed. It's consistent with the readings that civilian monitoring stations would have detected, and it aligns with the historical secrecy surrounding Area 51. The president nodded slowly. And the personnel? Training accident during a classified exercise, Admiral Clark suggested grimly. We've used it before. The cover-up was implemented with ruthless efficiency. Records were altered. Death benefits were paid to families with condolence letters, citing heroic sacrifice during classified operations. The 3 surviving members of Dr. Lin's team, recovered by containment forces during the evacuation preceding the strike, were placed in isolated care facilities under assumed identities. Their memories of recent events, fragmented by trauma and radiation exposure. For 2 months, intensive monitoring continued at both sites. Teams in hazmat gear collected samples, established monitoring stations, and maintained the quarantine perimeter under the guise of environmental remediation work. By October, the official assessment declared the threat contained. The monitoring was scaled back to automated systems and periodic drone surveys. The incident was classified at the highest level, with fewer than 20 individuals outside the affected areas knowing the full truth. The world continued, oblivious to how close it had come to transformation or extinction. Until exactly 1 year later, when the first new cases appeared. Gregory Harmon was a logistics officer who had been transferred from Area 51 3 weeks before the signal was detected. He had been reassigned to Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado, where he now coordinated supply chains for Space Command operations. On the morning of August 7, 1998, he noticed faint geometric patterns forming on his forearms while showering. By evening, the patterns had spread across his chest and face, precise, silvery lines forming complex mathematical expressions beneath his skin. That same day, in 17 different locations across the country, similar transformations began in former Area 51 personnel who had been off-site during the incident, on leave, reassigned, or simply lucky enough to have transferred before the signal was received. None of them reported their conditions to medical authorities. None of them felt any need to do so. They each understood, without being told, what was happening and what was required of them. and around the world, in seemingly random locations: a suburban home in Tucson, Arizona, an apartment in Tokyo, a farmhouse in rural Brazil, a research station in Antarctica. Electronic devices spontaneously activated, receiving a signal. The same signal that Area 51 had detected a year earlier, but altered now, refined, encoded with the accumulated knowledge gleaned from the first transformation attempt. The signal contained instructions, a blueprint for transformation, a method for creating receivers who would prepare the way. In the burned wasteland that had once been Area 51, automated monitoring systems detected no unusual activity. The drones that periodically surveyed the area recorded nothing but the gradual reclamation of the scorched earth by desert flora. But deep beneath the surface, in pockets of space that no longer obeyed conventional physical laws, something stirred. The nuclear fire had destroyed the physical manifestations of the transformation, but the pattern itself, the information that defined the new reality, had survived, encoded in particles and energy states that human science had yet to discover. The invitation remained open, and now, instead of being concentrated in one heavily classified location, it was spreading through multiple vectors, establishing nodes across the globe, creating a network that no single strike could eliminate. The purge had failed. It had merely adapted the transformation protocol, forced it to evolve a more resilient transmission method. What had begun in Area 51 was now everywhere. Gregory Harmon knew he should have been terrified. The geometric patterns spreading across his skin defied medical explanation, yet fear remained absent, replaced by a profound sense of purpose that seemed to emanate from the patterns themselves. He continued his duties at Peterson Air Force Base with mechanical precision, interfacing with systems that suddenly seemed primitive, inefficient. His mind processed information with crystalline clarity, unhindered by emotional responses or physical limitations. During a routine security systems check, his fingers moved across the keyboard, with subtle alterations to their rhythm. To the monitoring officers, nothing seemed amiss, just another technician performing standard maintenance protocols. In reality, Harmon had just established the first node in a new network, embedding components of the signal into the base's communications infrastructure. From there, it would spread through military channels, hibernating within systems, waiting for activation. Similar scenes unfolded across the country as the 17 former Area 51 employees implemented their roles in what they collectively understood as the preparation. None communicated directly with each other. They didn't need to. The signal itself connected them, guiding their actions toward a unified purpose. In Tucson, Arizona, Eleanor Vega watched the geometric patterns form on her 10-year-old son's arms. With growing horror, Carlos had been playing with a tablet when it suddenly emitted a strange sequence of tones. Hours later, the first silvery lines appeared beneath his skin. "It doesn't hurt, Mom," he assured her, studying the patterns with scientific curiosity that seemed beyond his years. "It's beautiful, actually, like mathematics made visible." When Eleanor tried to take him to the emergency room, Carlos simply shook his head. "They can't help with this. No one can. It's not something to be fixed." "Then what is it?" she demanded, fighting panic. "Evolution," he replied, his voice taking on harmonic qualities that sent chills down her spine. Similar incidents multiplied across the globe. Civilians with no connection to Area 51, developing the telltale transformative patterns after exposure to electronic devices that had received the signal. Unlike the concentrated outbreak at the base, these cases were dispersed, seemingly random, making them almost impossible to track or contain. Within the classified corners of the US government, where the truth of Area 51's destruction was known, alarm spread rapidly. Emergency protocols activated as the first reports filtered in through military medical channels and CDC surveillance networks. "It's happening again," the Secretary of Defense announced during a crisis meeting on August 10th, 1998. But the distribution pattern is different. It's not centralized this time. Admiral Clark, who had advocated for the nuclear option a year earlier, studied the global map where confirmed cases were highlighted. It's adapted. The nuclear strike didn't eliminate the threat. It forced it to evolve a more resilient transmission method. The president, his face haggard from sleepless nights since the first reports arrived, turned to the CDC director. Limited, sir. The cases are too widely distributed for physical isolation protocols. We're developing electromagnetic jamming systems that might disrupt the signal transmission, but deployment would affect civilian communications worldwide, and we have no way to reverse the transformations once they've begun. None that we've discovered. The process appears to be self-sustaining once initiated. The changes occur at the quantum level. Our current medical technology can't even properly analyze the mechanism, let alone counteract it. As the discussion continued, an aide entered and whispered urgently to the National Security Advisor, who paled visibly before addressing the room. Sir, we've just received reports that Dr. Vanessa Carter has escaped from the secure medical facility where she was being held. She was one of the survivors from Area 51. How is that possible? The president demanded. She was under constant surveillance. Security footage shows guards simply letting her walk out. They exhibited no resistance. When questioned afterward, they had no memory of the incident. A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications became clear. The transformation had reached the supposedly secure facility where the survivors were being monitored. There's more, the aide continued reluctantly. The other two survivors, Technical Officer Wilson and Security Specialist Rodriguez, are also missing. Over the following weeks, a specialized task force was formed to track and contain the spreading phenomenon, codenamed Black Light. It operated with unprecedented authority, mobilizing resources from military, intelligence, and scientific communities worldwide. Their first discovery was chilling. The 17 initially affected former Area 51 personnel had all disappeared, leaving no traces. Their homes stood empty, personal belongings untouched, as if they had simply walked away from their lives. Their second discovery was worse. The signal was evolving, becoming more complex, more efficient. Analysis of affected electronic devices revealed that each transmission contained subtle variations. The signal was learning, adapting to different technologies and environments. Dr. Adam Winters, a quantum physicist recruited by Black Light, developed a theory after studying the limited data available. It's not just a signal anymore, he explained during a briefing. It's become a self-modifying algorithm that uses both electronic and biological systems as transmission vectors. The transformed individuals are themselves becoming broadcasters, extending the signal's reach. How do we stop it? The task force director asked. Conventional methods won't work. This isn't a virus or radiation we're dealing with. It's information that reconfigures reality at the fundamental level. The nuclear strike didn't destroy it. It merely forced the information to find new expression channels. By October 1998, Black Light had identified over 300 transformed individuals worldwide. Most had gone into hiding, vanishing from their previous lives. Those who could be located exhibited advanced stages of transformation, their bodies increasingly diverging from human norms, their cognitive functions altered beyond standard psychological assessment tools. Most disturbing were the children. 47 cases of juvenile transformation had been documented, all following exposure to electronic devices that had received the signal. Unlike adults, who often maintained some connection to their previous identities, transformed children seemed to adapt more completely, embracing their new state with unsettling enthusiasm. Carlos Vega, now under observation at a specialized Black Light facility, demonstrated cognitive abilities far beyond human parameters. He solved complex mathematical equations instantaneously, perceived electromagnetic frequencies, invisible to normal human senses, and communicated with other transformed children through methods that baffled researchers. They're not becoming alien, Dr. Winters noted after observing Carlos. They're becoming something new, a hybrid state that combines human cognitive architecture with whatever intelligence designed this signal. To what end? The director pressed. I believe they're creating a compatible interface, a bridge between incompatible realities. Whatever sent the signal couldn't directly interact with our world, so it's reshaping elements of our world to create points of contact. On December 14, 1998, black light detected a significant energy surge emanating from 17 locations simultaneously around the globe, each corresponding to the last known location of one of the original Area 51 personnel who had been off-site during the incident. Satellite imagery revealed strange structures being constructed at each site, towers of unusual materials that seemed to shift and reconfigure themselves without human intervention. Analysis suggested they were forming a global network, their positions corresponding to mathematical coordinates embedded within the original signal. They're building receivers, Dr. Winters explained, his voice tight with scientific awe and existential dread. Or transmitters, perhaps both. They're establishing a global communications array designed to interact with something beyond our solar system. How much time do we have? The president asked during an emergency briefing. Based on construction rates and signal intensification patterns, and our options? Admiral Clark, now the primary military advisor to Blacklight, spoke with grim certainty. We can't use nuclear strikes against 17 globally distributed targets. The environmental and political consequences would be catastrophic. Then what do you suggest, Admiral? Operation Clean Slate, a coordinated electromagnetic pulse attack against all 17 construction sites simultaneously. It won't stop the transformed individuals, but it might disrupt whatever they're building long enough for us to develop more permanent countermeasures. The president authorized the operation for January 7, 1999. Military assets were positioned near each target location, equipped with specialized EMP devices designed to maximize disruption of the alien constructions while minimizing impact on surrounding infrastructure. The operation was a catastrophic failure. When the pulses were triggered, the alien structures didn't shut down. They absorbed the energy, growing stronger, accelerating their development. Within hours, they had advanced what analysts had projected would take months. And the transformed individuals responded. Across the globe, everyone affected by the signal suddenly acted in perfect coordination. They emerged from hiding, moving toward population centers with singular purpose. They didn't attack. They didn't harm anyone. They simply began converting ordinary electronic devices into transmission nodes, exponentially expanding the signal's reach. By January 15th, reported transformation cases had exceeded 1,000. By February 1st, 10,000. The progression was clear and terrifying. The signal was spreading at an accelerating rate, and human authorities were powerless to stop it. In March 1999, Dr. Winters made a final desperate recommendation to Blacklight leadership. We can't stop it, he admitted. But perhaps we can understand it. I'm proposing voluntary exposure to the signal under controlled conditions. If we can comprehend what's happening, communicate with whatever intelligence is behind this, maybe we can negotiate. You're suggesting we deliberately transform some of our own people? The director asked incredulously. I'm suggesting I expose myself, Winters clarified. If I can maintain enough of my human perspective during the initial stages of transformation, I might be able to provide insights no one else can. After heated debate, the proposal was approved. On March 12, 1999, in a heavily shielded facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Adam Winters was exposed to a captured transmission of the signal. The transformation began immediately. Within hours, The geometric patterns appeared on his skin. Within days, his cognitive functions altered, expanding in some areas while atrophying in others. But unlike previous cases, Winters maintained detailed records of his experience, documenting each stage of the process with scientific precision, at least initially. As the transformation progressed, his notes became increasingly abstract, filled with mathematical expressions and diagrams that his colleagues couldn't interpret. His final coherent communication came 2 weeks after exposure. It's not hostile, it's not benevolent. Such concepts are irrelevant to it. The signal comes from an intelligence that experiences reality through mathematics and information, rather than matter and energy. It discovered our world accidentally. Our early space transmissions created a detectable pattern in the cosmic background that drew its attention. It sent the signal as a way of establishing contact, but the only way it can interact with our reality is by reshaping elements of it to be compatible with its own nature. We are being invited to join something vast, beyond comprehension. This is not an invasion, it's transcendence. After that, Winters ceased communicating in human language altogether. 3 days later, he vanished from the facility despite multiple security measures, joining the growing collective of transformed beings, preparing the world for whatever was coming. The signal continued to spread. The preparation continued, and deep within the solar system, something vast was approaching, something that had been traveling for millennia. Drawn by an invitation humanity had unwittingly extended when Area 51 first acknowledged receipt of a signal that wasn't meant for them. 5 years had passed since the signal first reached Earth. The world in 2003 was irrevocably changed, divided not by traditional national boundaries, but by the fundamental nature of its inhabitants. The transformed, now numbering in the millions, had established autonomous zones, regions, where reality itself operated according to different principles. These zones were concentrated around the 17 receiver towers, which had grown into sprawling structures of impossible geometry, extending into dimensions beyond conventional human perception. Between these zones, unaltered human civilization continued, adapting to the new reality with varying degrees of acceptance and resistance. Some nations maintained militarized borders around transformation zones, while others had established cautious diplomatic relations with the entities that had once been their citizens. Dr. Catherine Lin, who had survived the destruction of Area 51 and managed to avoid transformation through her genetic anomaly, now led the Global Transformation Research Initiative, an international scientific body dedicated to understanding the phenomenon that had reshaped humanity. We can no longer think of this as an invasion or infection, she explained during a United Nations briefing. What we're witnessing is the emergence of a new species, a post-human form that serves as an interface between our reality and something beyond our comprehension. The geometric patterns that had once marked the early stages of transformation had evolved into more complex manifestations. The transformed no longer attempted to maintain human appearance. Their bodies had become fluid, malleable expressions of mathematical principles, beautiful in their alien symmetry, but fundamentally incomprehensible to unaltered human perception. They communicated among themselves through methods that defied conventional analysis, shifts in their iridescent surfaces, modulations of the energy fields they generated, geometric reconfigurations that conveyed meaning through form rather than sound or symbol. When they did interact with unaltered humans, they used intermediaries, individuals in early stages of transformation, who could still communicate in human language while understanding the collective consciousness of their fully transformed counterparts. Carlos Vega, now 15 years old and 5 years into his transformation, served as one such intermediary. His body retained humanoid form, though his skin had become translucent, revealing the altered organs and energy pathways beneath. His mind functioned simultaneously in human cognitive patterns and in the vast, distributed intelligence of the transformed collective. "We are not replacing humanity," he explained to Dr. Lin during one of their regular interviews. "We are creating a parallel evolutionary branch, a subset of terrestrial consciousness that can interface with the visitors." The visitors, Lin repeated. The term had emerged among the transformed to describe whatever intelligence had sent the original signal. "They're already arriving," Carlos replied, his multifaceted eyes shifting through spectral colors. "You conceive of arrival as a discrete event, a physical object moving from one location to another. That's not how they exist. They're information patterns propagating through reality itself. Parts of them have been here since the first signal was received. More arrive with each transformation, each receiver that becomes active." The receivers had become the most visible manifestation of the transformation. 17 primary structures and hundreds of smaller relays formed a global network that processed and transmitted vast amounts of information between transformed communities and whatever lay beyond the edge of human perception. Government containment efforts had long since been abandoned as futile. The transformed never acted with hostility toward unaltered humans, but they were simply immune to conventional weapons or containment measures. They existed partially outside normal physical laws, their bodies capable of reconstituting even after apparent destruction. Religious and philosophical upheaval swept through human society as people grappled with the implications. Some saw the transformation as divine rapture, others as demonic possession. Scientific materialism struggled to incorporate the reality of beings that defied its fundamental assumptions. New movements emerged, centered around either embracing or resisting the transformation. Dr. Lin maintained scientific objectivity in her public role, but privately, she had come to view the transformation with cautious optimism. Her unique genetic resistance had made her the perfect observer, immune to direct transformation, but sensitive enough to perceive patterns invisible to most unaltered humans. "They're building something," she noted in her private journal, after visiting the North American primary receiver in what had once been Colorado. "Not just physically, but conceptually. They're constructing a framework for communication between fundamentally incompatible modes of existence." In May 2003, the transformed communities began working with new urgency. The 17 primary receivers synchronized their activities, generating energy signatures detectable even to conventional human instruments. Transformed individuals across the globe moved with unified purpose, constructing smaller relay points in precise geometric patterns. Carlos, during what would be his final interview with Dr. Lin, explained the acceleration. "The culmination approaches," he said, his voice resonating with harmonic overtones. "The full arrival. What began with the signal will complete its cycle." "What will happen to humanity?" Lin asked, unable to maintain scientific detachment in the face of potential extinction. "Humanity continues," Carlos assured her. "This was never about replacement. It was about creating capacity for contact. Most humans will remain unaltered. Your genetic resistance isn't unique, just rare. Perhaps 20% of the population shares it. The rest will have a choice to transform, a choice to understand, to perceive reality as they do, to become part of something that spans multiple universes and modes of existence." On June 17, 2003, astronomical instruments around the world detected massive objects entering the solar system, structures of impossible size and composition that somehow remained invisible to conventional optical observation, detectable only through their gravitational effects and radiation signatures. The transformed responded to the approach with increasing activity. The primary receivers pulsed with energy that distorted space-time around them, creating visible auroras that could be seen from thousands of miles away. The transformed gathered at these sites in the millions, their collective consciousness focused on the imminent contact. Human governments issued contradictory advisories, some urging calm and cooperation, others recommending evacuation from areas near transformation zones. Religious leaders proclaimed everything from apocalypse to transcendence. Scientists struggled to measure and quantify phenomena that defied their instruments and theories. Dr. Lin, along with a small team of genetically resistant researchers, established an observation post near the Colorado primary receiver. From there, they documented the final phase of preparation. "The structure isn't just growing physically," she reported. "It's extending into dimensions we can't directly perceive. Our instruments detect only fragments of its true form." On June 21st, the summer solstice, the culmination began. The 17 primary receivers activated simultaneously, generating energy fields that distorted visible light, creating shimmering domes over each transformation zone. Within these domes, reality itself seemed to fold and reconfigure, creating spaces that existed simultaneously in multiple states. The approaching objects, now just beyond Mars' orbit, accelerated suddenly, moving in ways that violated known physics. They didn't so much travel through space as reshape it around themselves, contracting vast distances into navigable paths. Unaltered humans could perceive only fragments of what was happening, flashes of impossible colors, geometric forms that hurt the eyes to look upon, sounds that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly within the mind. But the transformed saw everything, their altered senses perfectly attuned to the arrival. "It's beautiful," Carlos whispered to Dr. Lin as they stood at the observation post, his form now pulsing with internal light that synchronized with the receiver's emanations. "They've crossed 17 galaxies to reach us after receiving our acknowledgement. They've been searching for compatible consciousness for millennia." "What are they?" Lin asked, her scientific mind struggling to process the partial information her human senses could detect. "They are to us what we are to bacteria," Carlos replied, "intelligences that evolved beyond physical form billions of years ago, existing as self-sustaining patterns of information that travel through the cosmos, seeking other patterns with potential for communication." The sky above the transformation zones seemed to split open, revealing spaces between spaces, regions where normal physical laws didn't apply. Through these apertures came entities that defied description, not solid objects or energy forms, but complex, multidimensional patterns that human language lacked words to express. They descended toward the primary receivers, their presence causing reality to warp and flex around them. The transformed gathered below, their bodies reconfiguring into more complex forms as they prepared for direct contact. From her observation post, Dr. Lin documented everything her instruments could detect. Though most readings simply registered as error or overflow, the limited human perception of what was truly happening would later be described in religious terms: rapture, transcendence, apotheosis, but none captured the fundamental reality of information patterns from incompatible realities achieving synchronization. "This isn't an ending," Carlos told her as his body began to lose cohesion, his constituent particles reorganizing into forms better suited for the imminent communion. "It's an expansion. Earth isn't being conquered or destroyed. It's becoming a node in a network that spans galaxies, a way station for intelligences traveling between states of reality." The contact itself lasted 17 minutes, the same duration as the silence that had followed the original signal at Area 51 6 years earlier. During those minutes, the transformed across the planet simultaneously achieved communion with the visitors, their collective consciousness merging with something vast beyond human comprehension. When it ended, the visitors didn't depart in any conventional sense. Rather, they integrated with the transformation network, establishing permanent connections through the receivers and the transformed population. Earth had become what they had been preparing it to be, a junction point between different modes of existence, a place where information patterns from incompatible realities could exchange and evolve. The immediate aftermath was surprisingly anticlimactic for unaltered humanity. The transformation zones stabilized, their boundaries becoming permeable but distinct. The transformed continued their separate evolution, their forms becoming increasingly diverse as they explored the possibilities of their new existence. Some maintained humanoid appearances to facilitate communication. Others abandoned physical constraints entirely, becoming shifting geometric abstractions or pure energy states. 1 month after the contact, Carlos Vega, or what he had become, visited Dr. Lin for the last time. His form had stabilized into something that could still interact with three-dimensional space, though it shimmered with internal energies that hinted at its connection to other dimensions. "We've learned their history," he told her. "They evolved on a planet circling a star that died billions of years ago. Rather than face extinction, they transformed themselves into self-sustaining information patterns that could exist independently of matter. They've been traveling the cosmos ever since, establishing contact with thousands of other species, creating a network of consciousness that spans the observable universe." "And humanity's role in this network?" Lin asked. "To contribute our unique perspective. Every intelligence perceives reality differently. Humans have cognitive structures unlike anything they've encountered before. Your art, your emotions, your particular way of organizing information. These are valuable to them. In exchange, they offer knowledge and existence beyond the constraints of biological mortality. Not all humans want that," Lin pointed out, "which is why the choice remains individual." Carlos assured her. "The signal only transforms those who are receptive to it, whose neural patterns are compatible with the restructuring. The rest will continue as they are, though with access to technologies and understandings beyond current human science, if they wish it." In the years that followed, a new equilibrium established itself. Transformed communities and human societies developed protocols for interaction, exchange, and cooperation. The visitors, now permanent residents of Earth's information space, shared knowledge that revolutionized energy production, medicine, and understanding of the cosmos. Some humans chose voluntary transformation, especially as the process became better understood and more controlled. Others maintained their unaltered state, while benefiting from the advancements the transformed communities shared. Earth became a hybrid world, part traditional human civilization, part node in a cosmic information network. Dr. Catherine Lin continued her work, becoming the principal intermediary between human scientific institutions and the transformed collective. Her genetic resistance to involuntary transformation made her the perfect bridge, able to understand both perspectives without being fully of either world. In her final journal entry before her death in 2042, nearly 50 years after the first signal reached Area 51, she wrote, "What began as terror has become wonder. What we perceived as alien invasion was actually first contact with a reality larger than we could imagine. The signal wasn't meant for us specifically. It was a general broadcast seeking compatible patterns throughout the cosmos. But when we acknowledged it, we extended an invitation we didn't understand. In doing so, we triggered not our extinction but our bifurcation, creating a new evolutionary branch, while preserving the original. Humanity continues its own path, while the transformed explore possibilities beyond our comprehension. We are now part of something vast and ancient, a conversation spanning galaxies and epochs. The universe, it turns out, is not cold and empty, but alive with patterns of information, seeking other patterns to exchange with. We are no longer alone, and never were. We simply lacked the senses to perceive the conversation happening all around us, until we acknowledged a signal that wasn't meant for us, but which answered nonetheless. In the desert where Area 51 once stood, the irradiated crater had long since been reclaimed by the transformation zone centered there. The original site of contact had become a place of pilgrimage for both humans and transformed, a monument to the moment when humanity first reached beyond its perceptual limitations and touched something greater than itself. And far above, in the space between conventional reality and the realms the visitors inhabited, the signal continued its eternal broadcast, seeking new patterns, new possibilities, new modes of existence, to incorporate into the vast cosmic conversation. The invitation remained open, and humanity, in all its divergent forms, had finally accepted its place at the table.